I have my cap blank chucked up and I'm ready to drill a hole down the center to accept the section of my pin. Now ultimately I need to thread the inside of this cap with matching threads to the body of my pin. Those are M13.1, so I'm going to drill a 12mm hole in the end of this blank. I do not want to drill a 12mm hole all the way down the length of the blank, because if I do, that limits my options for shaping the pin. So what I'm going to do is, brought my calipers over, and I'm going to measure the end of my section, and that comes out to about 9.14. I grabbed a 23/64" bit, which equates to about 9.23 millimeters, and I'm going to measure the length of my section, and I'm going to drill with this bit to that distance down the center of my blank. The distance I want to drill is about 52.24 millimeters. That's just a little over the length of my section, but that should give me plenty of room to work with for shaping my blank. I'm going to use a starter bit to put a pilot hole dead center of my blank. I've marked my drill bit to 52.23 millimeters, and I'm ready to go ahead and drill my first hole down the center of my blank. We wanted to drill our blank out to 52.28 millimeters, and what I'm going to do now is test and make sure that we did. Looks like I'm at about 51.58. I need to go just a tiny bit deeper. The next thing that I need to do is drill a hole down the center of my cap deep enough to accept the grip portion as well as the threaded portion of my section. Now I don't happen to have a 12mm bit, so I grabbed a 31/64" bit from my kit, and if I take my calipers and I measure that, you can see that it comes out to about 12.3 millimeters. I'm going to be tapping this to 13 millimeters, so this should be perfect. The depth that I want to drill to is from the shoulder of the pin body all the way to the outside edge of the grip, and that comes out to about 30.89 millimeters. I've made a mark on my bit at 30.89 millimeters, and we're ready to drill. With the hole drilled, I've now placed my M13.8 tap into my tap and die holder, and I'm ready to go ahead and tap the threads in my cap. With the threads tapped in the cap, I'm now ready to go ahead and test fit my pin. And we've got a beautiful tight fit between the cap and the body. I'm ready to remove the cap from the collet chuck, get it put onto a mandrel, we'll flip it around, and then we'll start shaping it. I'm ready to turn the cap of my pin, and what I did is I went through my box of parts, and this is a cap from an olive wood pin that I made a while back, and the pin was nice, but it just didn't quite make the cut, so I went ahead and disassembled it, and I've got all of the parts in my box, and I keep them just for situations like this. This particular cap, I like the shape of it, so it's going to be the model for the cap that I make for this pin. Obviously this cap is a little too thin, I'll turn this one thicker, but I really liked the way it looked with the body, so I'm going to go ahead and attempt to replicate this cap out of this particular material so that we can finish this pin. I've been turning for a while, and I want to go ahead now and very quickly check this with the body just to see how we're doing. We want to make sure the lid doesn't go below the surface of the body, and we're pretty close there. We got about a fingernail all the way around. It looks pretty good. I've been using my mandrel saver on this end just to kind of give me some support, but I think I'm to the point where I'm going to use it for a few more minutes just to kind of take this down a tiny bit farther, and then I'll remove it for cleaning up the end of this blank, and I'll just use my hand to support and my skew just to sort of bring this down. But you can see it's kind of fat right here. You need to start tapering from here down. So let's get it back on the mandrel, turn it a little farther down, and see what we get. I've got my cap pretty well where I want it. I'm dealing with an awful lot of vibration, and I think it's just because I don't have any support down here at the other end. I don't want to mess things up. I've got a decent fit at the cap end with the body, So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to actually use a little sandpaper, which is something I don't normally do on acrylic style blanks, but I'm going to use a little sandpaper just to sort of take, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there's a little bit of a hump here in the middle, and I want to level that out. And once I do, then I'll move to my micro mesh pads and really start to clean this up. I'll also kind of shape the end a little bit. You can see it's still flat where that mandrel saver was pressing against it. I couldn't really turn it down because it's flat against flat, but I can clean that up with the sandpaper and make it look really nice. So I'm fairly happy with where I'm at right now. I just need to come up with an idea for giving myself support at the end of my mandrels and still being able to do what I want to do with the other end of the cap blank. I used some sanding pads and my cordless drill to sand this down to 600, and it really has a nice shape. It's a nice smooth flow from one end to the other. I'm ready now to use the micro mesh pads and polish it up a little bit. It always blows my mind just what a nice job micro mesh and a little water will do to polish up an acrylic style blank. I'm going to go ahead and get my buffing wheels on the lathe, and we're going to buff this up. Here's a quick peek at my latest pen. There's the cap. There's the back end of the pen. I'm happy with the shape, and I'm about 80% happy with the overall pen. And where I'm not happy is right here. What I was trying to do on my cap is when I sanded it, I was trying to put a bit of a chamfer on the end so that it kind of had a nice transition from body to cap. And I got a little too aggressive with my sanding pads, and you can see a tiny bit of a lip. Not super happy about that, but I do like the section, the longer section. It's got the Parker refill, and I think overall it's not a bad pen. I've got the triple start threads so that if the pen body doesn't line up with the cap, I can back it up one and get a nice alignment there. That's more for show than anything. I really hope you enjoyed my long-awaited cap video for this pen. I'm sorry it took so long to get to you. There were two things that caused that to happen. One was right after I made the custom aluminum mandrel for the cap, I finished up one evening. I left the cap threaded on the mandrel. Overnight it got down in the 20s, and it stayed cold for quite a long time here. And what happened is I attempted to remove this cap from the mandrel to take it to club to show what I was working on, and it had shrunk. The material had shrunk because it got so cold. I almost couldn't get it off the mandrel, so I'm really glad I didn't turn it, because I'm afraid I would have probably had issues with breakage had I got it down nice and thin and attempted to remove it from that mandrel. And the second reason is you've probably noticed a brief absence by me from the shop, and that is due to some responsibilities I have with my current job. As I mentioned earlier, I'm about 80% happy with this pen. I did learn something. You know, guys, when you start making something like this, I'm going to probably have to make 100 of these before I get to where I can make a perfect pen. But I am happy with even making mistakes. I'm happy. And the reason why, I've always heard the word fail. First attempt at learning. And that's exactly what this is. I was trying to chamfer the cap, and I chamfered it a little bit below the body. Now, I could always chuck the body back up, and I could always chamfer the body to where the two meet, but I don't know that I want to do that. I kind of like it the way it is, you know. You got to start somewhere. Do not expect, when you go out to your shop, whether you're turning a kitted pen or a kitless pen, do not expect the very first one you do to be perfect. It is not going to be. Accept that, okay? If you make a mistake, attempt to repair it. Every time you do something like that, you're learning, because the next time you make it, you won't make that same mistake. This little chamfer, I won't cut it that deep next time. I've learned my lesson, and my next pen will be far better than this one. Every pen you make gets just a little bit better. So stick with it, guys. Don't get discouraged. Don't get frustrated. If you make a mistake, don't throw it away. Try some stuff on it. Experiment on that blank. You never know what you're going to come up with, and you never know what you're going to learn. I'd really like to thank you guys for joining me in the shop tonight. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon, and have a wonderful evening, everybody.